Hey, today I'm talking about 3 sex comedies from the 70s. Or that was my original intention. I watched one B movie from the 70s that was pretty good, and then I followed it up with Googling sex comedies from the 70s. And technically the other 2 films are sex comedies from the 70s, but they are not the vibe I was looking for, and actually they were kind of troublesome for some really interesting reasons. But yeah, the names of the 3 movies I'm talking about today are Guess What We Learned in School Today, The Owl and the Pussycat, and Get Out Your Handkerchiefs. First up is Guess What We Learned in School Today. This is a 1970 film. It's really a B movie, and it's interesting. The basic idea of the movie is that it's very pro sex education in school, and it also points out the absurdity / hypocrisy that comes from very sexually repressed people, and also just like how lack of information can be damaging, and we should really free yourself and open your mind to the sexual revolution, I think is the easiest way to put it. I can't really tell you the premise because it's just kind of a whole lot of things. It's a good like half dozen people all doing a bunch of stuff, and some of them are naked for some of it. And I'll be honest, I very much so enjoyed the nudity in this one. This one would be a little hard for me to recommend just because like the beginning of the movie is so nonsensical, because they just like start doing all of the plots at essentially the same time. Like it'd be one shot on one plot, then suddenly another shot, another plot, and then suddenly we also have like fantasy flashback things the characters are also doing. Eventually it started to come together. They weren't really trying to go for like an experimental thing. It was just a bad editor's attempt at humor, and it really didn't work. I think the only way I would recommend this movie is if you're like drinking, especially if you're like drinking with friends. Like it's really silly and ridiculous, and like the points are valid, it's just going about it in a very silly way. And I kind of fell in love with the one neighbor lady. She just had like great bone structure on her face. I'm just like, how are you doing this, lady? Like, I get that it's genetics, but like, dang, woman. Also, it has such a crazy end. Like, you do not see where this movie is going, and it's great. Next up is The Owl and the Pussycat. This is also a 1970 film that stars Barbra Streisand and George Segal. And the basic premise is this man one night notices that his neighbor across the way is about to have sex, so he whips out his binoculars to spy on them for research purposes. But then he notices that the man this woman's hooking up with is paying her, and he's like, can't have any of that prostitution in my general vicinity. So he calls it into the landlord kicks her out. She then discovers that it was this guy who ratted her out, and then she proceeds to yell at him for the rest of the movie. Eventually they have sex and maybe live happily ever after together. I don't really know, I kind of stopped caring after a while. Barbra Streisand just yells for the entirety of the movie, and it's awful. She is such an obnoxious, terrible character. And it also might be racist, because this is based off a play, and in the play, the 2 characters are an interracial couple, with her character being portrayed by a black woman. When like looking at the movie with that knowledge, it seems like Barbra Streisand's character is just a really awful black stereotype. And yeah, I'm not a fan of that. I mean, yay for being progressive in the 70s, an interracial couple, that's cool. Stereotypes are still not good. Yeah, I don't know. I just didn't find it funny at all. Definitely wasn't sexy at all. Like, Barbra Streisand does have a lot of cleavage for the entire movie, but like, it's just whatever. I couldn't put this movie higher than the didn't liked, because she was just so freaking obnoxious, and I was bored and I didn't care about the movie. And lastly is Get Your Handkerchiefs Ready. Isn't that title great? It's totally a masturbation joke, right? Like, it's not like, oh, we're gonna cry so much at this film. No, it's totally like, get your handkerchiefs ready so you can ejaculate into them. So I was really excited with that title. I'm like, oh, this is gonna be some real raunchy, crazy, silly sex comedy stuff. No, it really wasn't. This is French, by the way. I don't know, it doesn't really matter. So the premise is this man and woman are married, and she is insanely depressed, and doctors can't figure out why. So the man just gets fed up one day and asks a random stranger to bang his wife. Eventually he agrees to, and they essentially become a throuple, which doesn't really make sense because she really didn't enjoy the sex with the stranger. I mean, she didn't dislike it either. She was just kind of indifferent to everything. And like, if the movie was just that, I would have been more okay with it. Probably put it in the meh category. But it takes a turn in the last section that makes it awful. So basically one of the guys is a sort of teacher, and they kind of run a summer camp thing for a hot second. And well, at this summer camp thing, one of the kids gets really bullied, and the woman takes an interest in him, and then eventually sleeps with a 13-year-old boy. Sorry, rapes a 13-year-old boy, my mistake. And then she eventually runs away with him and has his child. This movie won Best Foreign Language Film. I feel like I don't need to explain why I'm not a fan of what happened. Hopefully you can understand. Like, sure, from the 13-year-old's perspective, that's fun. But from literally everyone else, that's awful. What the fuck is this fucking movie? Just gonna say two quick asides. One, don't have sex with minors. And two, having babies doesn't solve problems. Hope everyone knows this, but you know, some people just have to learn it somehow, I guess. And hopefully it was before me telling you this now. Now for today's rankings. First up, we got Guess What We Learned in School Today, sitting at number 88 in the liked section. And then after that is The Owl and the Pussycat, sitting at number 127 in the didn't like category. And then not too terribly far behind is Get Out Your Handkerchiefs, sitting at number 133, also in the didn't liked category. And this is out of a total of 138 old movies so far this year.